He proposed to another woman in front of 300 guests and 14 cameras. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I smiled like the good ghost I'd trained myself to be. That night, in the spotlight I built for him, he erased me without mercy and called it love. Everyone clapped. Champagne poured. Headlines bloomed. And I vanished, quietly, perfectly like a trick of light. But some disappearances aren't endings. They're detonations in disguise. He thought he ended the scene. What he actually did was start the story. My story. Not a revenge tale, but a resurrection. And when I returned, it wasn't to be seen. It was to be undeniable. Maya Severi didn't mind being invisible. At least, that's what she'd told herself. She wasn't the kind of woman who needed Instagram stories or standing ovations. She was the one behind the curtain, the one who moved mountains so someone else could shine. 7 years of it. And not for just anyone. For Gleb Sey, the director they were calling the new Tarkovsky in film circles from Cannes to Montreal. Her husband. Her project. Every detail of his rise had her fingerprints on it. She was the one who pitched his first concept to a skeptical investor over whiskey in Prague. The one who rewrote his grant proposals at 3 a.m., who cold-called curators when he was too philosophical to do admin. She even picked the title of the film that launched his career, The Spaces Between Us. Irony now. People called her his muse. Cute. That's what they called women whose ideas you steal with a kiss and a nod. But tonight, Maya's name wasn't on the guest list. Not officially. She had arranged the whole festival screening in Venice, chosen the venue, convinced a panel of judges to include Silence of Fire in competition. She even negotiated a rare art film distribution deal. No one would know that, of course. Gleb had a publicist who crafted his myth in carefully controlled sound bites. And Maya? She had spreadsheets and stress migraines. She stood now in front of the hotel's oversized mirror, adjusting the black silk gown she'd found in Berlin, the city she once thought she'd never leave. Her hair was pinned, her earrings subtle. She looked like someone's powerful wife. It felt like costume. In the elevator, she practiced her smile, restrained, elegant, neutral, the kind that wouldn't betray the tornado under her ribs. Gleb had been distant lately, more performative than usual. Too many late editing sessions, too many texts he flipped over when she walked in. She hadn't pressed. She was too exhausted to play detective. The limo ride to the red carpet was quiet. He typed on his phone. She looked out the window at the canals, dark ribbons slicing through the glowing city. As they stepped out, cameras exploded like fireworks. Gleb, over here, photographers yelled. Maya stepped slightly behind him, by instinct. He turned for the cameras, the charming tilt of his head in full effect. No one called her name. And still, she smiled. Because this was what love looked like, wasn't it? The giving, the holding back, the silence behind someone else's soundtrack. But deep inside, something tightened. A thread pulled taut. And Maya Severi, who had spent years being the frame around someone else's painting, felt, for the first time, the edges of her own shape. Something was coming, and she wouldn't look away this time. The Sala della Luna was a restored 18th century opera house turned cinema, draped in crushed red velvet and the scent of incense and old stone. Maya had selected it herself, down to the placement of the overhead chandeliers and the mirrored arches that refracted the flickering lights like prisms. It was perfect, intimate, but grand. The kind of venue where a career could be reborn or buried. The audience filtered in, producers, critics, celebrities, the carefully selected influencers with their sleek cameras and curated cynicism. Gleb floated among them. all sharp suit and casual brilliance. His hand grazing the small of Maya's back just often enough to make her feel like a prop. His smile was wide, almost too wide. She noticed Ada Wolf the moment she entered. The young actress moved like she owned the air around her, bare shoulders, glossy red lips, a dress that defied gravity and taste. The photographers leaned toward her like flowers to the sun. Gleb broke off a conversation mid-sentence to greet her. He kissed both her cheeks. The second kiss lingered. Maya's jaw locked. They had spoken about Ada before. A child, Gleb had said. Talented, but volatile. Maya had defended her casting. She has a rawness. It'll translate. She hadn't realized it had translated into their bed. The lights dimmed. A hush fell. The screen ignited. Silence of Fire was good. Not a masterpiece, but solid. Visually stunning. Maya watched the crowd, not the film. Their faces, their gasps, their laughter, all carefully calibrated by Gleb's direction. He was a manipulator of feeling, a puppeteer with a lens. Maya used to love that about him. When the credits rolled, applause erupted. A standing ovation. The final frame lingered, a burning figure walking into the sea. A symbol, he'd once told her, of liberation. She remembered suggesting the water. It had originally ended in smoke. The host invited Gleb on stage. He adjusted his collar, offered his usual charming nod, and took the mic. "Thank you," he began, his voice low and velvety. "To everyone who believed in this film, who walked through fire with me." Maya waited, her hands in her lap, calm, controlled. "And most of all," Gleb continued, turning, "to someone who illuminated the darkest scenes. Ada Wolf, would you join me?" The crowd gasped, delighted. Ada, radiant in the spotlight, ascended the steps. Maya's throat dried. Gleb knelt. From his jacket pocket, a small box. Open. A ring. Cheers exploded. Maya didn't move. She was air in a room full of thunder. He stayed on one knee far too long. Gleb Sey, man of 100 film metaphors, knew exactly how long a moment needed to linger. He held the ring out like it was part of the performance, part of the scene, the lights framing him like the goddamn poster boy of emotional vulnerability. The audience, eating from his hand, held its breath. Then came the applause, the cheers, the whistling. Ada's hands flew to her mouth, and she made the kind of surprised face actresses practice in mirrors. Then, through the flood of camera flashes, she nodded, shouted, "Yes," and pulled him into a kiss so theatrical it could have been scripted. Maybe it had been. Maya didn't blink. Her eyes fixed on the edge of the stage, as if the red velvet curtains would part and reveal the real show. Maybe the joke was on her. Maybe the whole theater had conspired. She sat in the front row, just meters away, yet already erased. The lights caught Ada's face in perfect glow. Her own face was in shadow. The woman who had brokered the deal with the venue, who negotiated Gleb's hotel suite, who rewrote entire chunks of his dialogue at his request. Gone. Around her, people buzzed with confused excitement. Wasn't he married? I thought Maya was his wife. Maybe they separated. She doesn't look surprised. No reaction at all. Creepy, honestly. She heard every whisper like pins pushed through skin. One by one. Tiny, precise. Gleb had always loved control. This was no accident. This was theater, choreographed betrayal, scripted for maximum narrative impact. The microphone squealed briefly as Gleb tried to speak again. Some kind of sentimental post-proposal speech, but the audio cut, and the crowd's laughter drowned him out. Maya stood. Not abruptly, not dramatically, just deliberately, like a woman leaving a meeting early. She walked up the aisle, past the guests still clapping, past the rows of disoriented faces, past the security guard by the door who gave her a double take, but didn't stop her. The click of her heels on the marble was the only sound in her head. Outside, the night was heavy with humidity and perfume and the sick sweet buzz of cameras still chasing a different woman. Maya didn't stop walking. She didn't cry. She didn't shatter. She just disappeared into the dark, into herself, with only one thought repeating in her mind. This was not the ending. The moon hung above Venice like a pale, disinterested witness. Maya walked with no direction, only momentum, her heels clacking against cobblestones slick with mist. The silk dress clung to her like a bad idea. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew where she wouldn't return. Behind her, the echoes of applause faded. Someone else's triumph. Someone else's script. She passed shuttered shops, drunken lovers, a child sobbing in a stroller. All of it blurred. She didn't cry. She couldn't. It was as if her tear ducts had gone on strike in solidarity with the rest of her body. Only her thoughts moved, fast and sharp. She turned down an alleyway lit by a single flickering lamp and found herself facing a rust-stained door with a peeling sign. Lacanda Anima. A cheap pensione. No concierge, no champagne, no paparazzi. Perfect. The man at the desk barely looked up. She handed him a card. He handed her a key. No words exchanged. The room was on the 3rd floor. No elevator. No windows. One bed, one mirror, one chair. That was enough. She peeled off the dress like skin and sat in her underwear on the cold wooden floor, knees pulled to her chest. Around her, silence. Not metaphorical. Actual. It rang like a hymn. She powered off her phone. The screen flashed briefly, 62 messages. Journalists, friends, acquaintances, colleagues. Probably even Gleb, trying to spin the scene before it went viral. She didn't read them. Let the story shape itself. From her suitcase, she pulled out the small black notebook she always traveled with. A place for observations, sketch ideas, curatorial fragments. She flipped to a blank page. Project, disappearance. The words landed like a blade. Sharp, deliberate, clean. Subtitle, a manual for the woman with no name. She stared at the page. This wasn't a diary. She wasn't here to emote. This was a blueprint. If they wanted her gone, fine. She'd vanish. But not quietly, not gently, and not without architecture. Her body still hummed from adrenaline, but her mind had locked into something else. Structure, narrative, meaning. Her survival would be curated. Exhibit-worthy. Somewhere in the city, champagne glasses clinked and press releases were drafted. But Maya Severi was already gone. All that remained in that dim, nameless room was someone new. And she was building. Berlin greeted her with the gray indifference of late October. Rain-streaked windows, the sour breath of the U-Bahn, and a skyline that looked perpetually under construction. Perfect, she thought. A city always in the process of becoming. Karina Lewandowski met her at Ostkreuz station, all clunky boots, windblown hair, and no small talk. That was their friendship, functional, durable, undramatic. Karina simply hugged her, hard and silent, then grabbed her suitcase. No questions, no pity. They climbed 5 flights to a dusty mansard apartment smelling of dust, black tea, and old dog. Emmanuel, Karina's grumpy terrier, barked twice and limped back to his bed. "You can have the loft space," Karina said, pointing upward. "It's warm, and the roof only leaks on one side." Maya nodded. Her voice hadn't fully returned yet. The first week passed in fragments. Maya slept long, dreamless hours. She made strong coffee and forgot to drink it. She wandered the apartment like a ghost who hadn't realized she was dead. Her body had arrived in Berlin, but her sense of self was still somewhere on a red carpet, clapping for someone else. Karina didn't push. She just left things in Maya's path. A worn copy of The Second Sex on the nightstand. A folded newspaper article about feminist installations in Neukölln. A handwritten list. Openings this month, go. Maya stared at the list for 3 days before circling one. A performance piece titled Unwoven. She went alone. It was in an industrial warehouse near Treptower Park, raw concrete and rusted beams. The performance featured a woman slowly unpicking a wedding dress, thread by thread, then stitching the loose threads into a cocoon around herself. Maya stood at the back, arms folded, unmoving. At first, it felt absurd, then ritualistic, then, inevitably, personal. By the time the final thread vanished into the cocoon, Maya was crying. Not loudly, not performatively, but undeniably. It wasn't grief. It was recognition. The woman in the cocoon had vanished and become. Maya walked back in the cold, her cheeks stiff with dried salt. In her notebook that night, she wrote just 2 words. Build forward. Something had shifted. She still didn't know what she was becoming. But for the first time in weeks, she wanted to find out. The gallery was called Weißnull, White Zero, a minimalist, underfunded corner of Berlin's art underground, wedged between a techno bar and a vegan noodle joint in Friedrichshain. Maya walked in on a whim, her CV folded like a napkin in her pocket. The receptionist was too busy arguing about grant money to notice her for several minutes. It felt like home. She asked to speak to the director. 20 minutes later, she was hired. Not because of her name, not because of her reputation, because she knew how to install things without breaking them, and she didn't mind sweeping floors. Maya Severi, former festival architect, was now part-time curator, part-time janitor. It was perfect. The first weeks were quiet. She cataloged works, patched cracked walls, and wrote press blurbs in English and German. Her anonymity was a kind of oxygen. No one knew her story. No one cared. But in the quiet, ideas began to stir. She started collecting objects, found ones, gifted ones. A broken compact mirror, a child's ballet slipper, a scorched letter, all from women. Some were from artists she met at the gallery. Some were strangers she emailed. The question was simple. What did you lose when they stopped seeing you? Their answers were complex, brutal, human. One night, over cheap ramen and sparkling water, she pitched the idea to the gallery's co-director, an installation called Reconstruction of the Body. An exhibition of personal remains, she explained. Not bones, objects. Traces leftovers of selves erased or abandoned. He blinked. Sounds intense. It is. He shrugged. If you can find the funding, we'll give you the back room. That night, she drafted a concept note. The title stayed. So did the subtitle. A collective memory of female disintegration and what rises after. Karina introduced her to women across the city. A retired opera singer who brought the shoes she wore the night her voice cracked and her career ended. A nurse who hadn't worn earrings since her partner told her they made her look too ambitious. A theology student who donated her childhood Bible, pages blacked out with red ink. Maya contributed something too. A necklace, delicate gold, the one Gleb gave her on their wedding day. She didn't smash it. She melted half of it, like the memory itself was blistered. Each object got its own pedestal. A small plaque. No names. The walls would remain white. but nothing inside them would be blank. She wrote the first piece by accident. It started as a caption for one of the exhibition's items, a dress worn once, applauded by strangers, and then discarded, still holding the shape of the woman it betrayed. She posted it on Medium under the pseudonym Silenza. No tags, no bio, just the title, The Dress That Wasn't Mine. By morning, it had 100 views. By evening, 10,000. Women commented in whisper-tone paragraphs. This was me. I still have that dress. Thank you for saying it. So she wrote again. And again. The second essay, The Museum of Unseen Labor. About the invisible work behind men's greatness. The hands that schedule, edit, soften, strategize. The third, The Reverse Applause. About clapping for a betrayal you helped build. Her inbox began to fill, not with industry names or old acquaintances, but with women. A poet from Warsaw, a refugee from Aleppo, a chef from Toronto, strangers across oceans, united by the quiet grief of being erased in real time. They didn't want advice. They wanted to be seen. Silenza became a presence. A quiet roar. One day, buried between a spam ad for collagen gummies and a Substack invite, an email appeared. Subject, TEDx Tokyo, invitation to speak. Body, we read your essay, The Museum of Unseen Labor. We are curating a panel titled Rebuilding Self After Erasure. Would you be open to sharing your story? We offer travel, translation, and silence before the microphone. She stared at the screen for 10 minutes before moving. Then she opened her notebook and added one line. They're listening. That night, she walked the streets of Newcoln until her feet ached. Not to think, not to process, just to move. Movement was proof of momentum. She didn't tell anyone. Not Karina. Not the gallery. Not even her own name. But inside, she felt it. The voice she'd surrendered years ago, on stages, in edits, in shared hotel rooms, and swallowed opinions, had returned. Not loud, not furious, clear. She sat at her desk and clicked reply. Yes, I'll speak. No signature, just a click. And the echo of her own name whispered back to her from the silence. He arrived without warning. A Thursday, overcast. The gallery smelled faintly of plaster and wet coats. Maya was in the back room, adjusting lighting for the final object, an old photograph intentionally faded to near erasure. The gallery assistant peeked in. There's someone asking for you. Tall, Russian, kind of smug. She knew before she turned. Gleb stood in the entrance, hands in his coat pockets. That same offhand charm he wore like an aftershave. His scarf was designer. His ego intact. Maya, he said, as if they'd just had coffee yesterday. She didn't move, didn't speak. Let the silence stretch. I saw the write-up, he offered. In art now. You're everywhere lately. And yet here you are, she replied. Her voice was even, neutral, curatorial. I made mistakes, he said, stepping inside. The proposal, it was too much. Too fast. Ada, she's not you. No, Maya said. She's not. He hesitated, scanning the gallery. His gaze landed on the melted necklace, sealed under glass, half ruined and wholly intentional. You included that, he asked. I curated it, she said. Like I curated you. He flinched. Barely. But she saw it. He tried a different tactic. I've missed you. The clarity you bring. The steadiness. We made something real. Maybe we could. She cut him off with emotion, barely a shake of her head. This isn't a sequel, she said. Gleb stepped closer, lowering his voice. I'm lost, Maya. I need you. Her eyes narrowed. not in cruelty, but recognition. He wasn't here for her. He was here for rescue. He was always drowning in the wake of his own decisions, always looking for a life raft made of her. "No," she said. "You need an audience." He opened his mouth, closed it. His charm, for once, misfired. Maya walked toward the exhibit center. "You see that?" She pointed to the glass cube holding the letter from a woman who left her abusive husband but kept his apology notes as artifacts. "That's survival. That's narrative. That's what I do now." Gleb's voice was low. "You're really not coming back." "I was never yours to come back to," she said. He stood in silence for a moment, then gave a tight nod, the kind men give when they realize a door is not just closed, but gone. When he left, he didn't look back. Neither did she. Tokyo shimmered under soft rain, a city built from silence and motion. Maya arrived with a single carry-on and a notebook. No entourage, no publicist, just her name, finally unburdened. The conference was held inside a modern glass auditorium, all clean lines and hushed energy. Speakers whispered final notes to themselves backstage. Maya stood in the wings, her badge clipped neatly to her blazer, her heart calm, not quiet, but steady, like a drum at the center of a procession. The panel title, Rebuilding Self After Erasure. Her name beneath it, Maya Severi, artist, curator, voice. She hadn't told Gleb she was coming. Or Karina. She needed this to be hers. The stage manager gave her a nod. Time. She walked onto the red circle alone. The audience was a blur of open notebooks and blinking eyes. Lights framed her. Not harsh, not theatrical. Just light. She began. "I once curated a life I wasn't allowed to live. I built careers, launched dreams, held spotlights. But my name was never in the credits. Not until I disappeared." She didn't read. She remembered. She spoke of applause she never received. Of a necklace half melted. Of dresses worn once, never for herself. Of a performance where she stood, in the front row, clapping for her own erasure. "I was called wife. Then ex-wife. Then nothing. But what I am, what I always was, is mine." A stillness overtook the auditorium. No coughs. No shifting chairs. Just breath and listening. She ended with this. "You don't rebuild by going back. You rebuild by leaving. Quietly. Clearly. Without the need to explain. And then you speak. Not louder. Just enough to hear yourself again." Applause didn't erupt, it rose. A swell. A standing wave of hands. Not for spectacle, but recognition. Backstage, a young woman from the volunteer team approached, eyes wet. "You said what I didn't know I needed to hear," she whispered. Maya nodded, touched her arm. No performance. No reply rehearsed. She walked out of the auditorium into the misty Tokyo evening, blazer over her shoulder, heels in hand. Not triumphant. Just free. The wave didn't crash. It rose. It began with reposts. Clips of her TEDx talk subtitled in Spanish, Korean, Arabic. Snippets of her voice layered over videos of women painting, crying, walking barefoot into the ocean. Then came the articles. Le Monde, The Guardian, The Cut. They didn't call her the ex-wife of director Gleb Sey. They called her what she had always been, a curator, an author, an architect of memory. Maya watched it unfold not with awe, but with precision. This wasn't virality. This was response. Echo. Reverberation from women who had been holding in whole storms. Her inbox brimmed with stories. Some poetic, some broken, all real. She answered each one herself. Meanwhile, the gallery in Berlin offered her a permanent position, head curator, full creative control. Weissnull wanted a full cycle based on her work: silence, reconstruction, becoming. She said yes. Publishers wrote too. A compilation of her essays, her story, her exhibition notes. They wanted a book. Maya had always resisted memoir, but this wasn't that. This was a record, a survival document. She titled it, A Manual for the Woman with No Name. Karina wept when she held the contract. Medium was no longer enough. Maya launched her own platform, a digital archive where women could anonymously submit stories, artifacts, voices. She named it The Room Without Mirrors, a space that didn't reflect, but absorbed. One afternoon, while sipping bitter coffee from a chipped mug in her kitchen, she typed her name into a search bar. Not vanity, curiosity. First result, Maya Severi, visionary of the unnamed. Second result, the woman who melted her wedding necklace and built an empire. She laughed. Empire? No. Something quieter. Something stronger. Gleb faded like background noise. A footnote, if that. Ada? She had vanished entirely, swallowed by the cycle of temporary fame. Maya didn't gloat. That wasn't the point. She simply didn't think about them anymore. Gregory, the gallery's co-director, poked his head into her office late one evening. "You've got a visitor," he said. "From Vogue. They want a feature reconstruction." She blinked. "Vogue?" He grinned. "I know. But you're a movement now." She closed her laptop, stretched her fingers, and looked at the boards on her wall, sketches for the next exhibition. One image dominated, a woman holding a lantern inside her own ribcage. She would call it Guided from Within, not because she was healed, but because she was leading. 1 year to the day, Weissnull pulsed with soft light and hushed reverence. The gallery's walls, still white, now held stories so dense they bent the room's gravity. Reconstruction of the body, 1 year later, was not just an exhibition, it was a living archive. Each object, each plaque, was now paired with an update. A return, a rebirth. The ballet slipper had been turned into a sculpture of bronze toes. The red-inked Bible, now displayed alongside a hand-bound book of poems. The scorched letter, pressed flat, now bore a child's drawing on its reverse. Maya walked the floor slowly, her heels silent on the polished concrete. Guests murmured around her, journalists, artists, activists. But no one interrupted her. She moved like the axis around which the room turned. In the center, the melted wedding necklace. Still half molten, still hers. But this time, beside it, a second object, a folded program from TEDx Tokyo. On it, a handwritten note. She wrote herself back in. As the crowd settled, Karina stepped to the mic and introduced her. "Maya Severi," she said simply, "curator of what comes after." Maya took the stage without paper, without rehearsal. This exhibition began in silence. The kind that wraps itself around you until you forget how your own name sounds. But silence, it turns out, is not empty. It's full of what hasn't been said yet. She looked out at the crowd, not to impress them, not to convince, but to connect. We talk about resilience like it's something pretty, but rebuilding is not graceful. It's lonely. It's slow. It costs things no one sees. She paused. But when we build forward, not for applause, not for revenge, just for truth, the shape we take is finally our own. A quiet, not silence, but something deeper. Then applause. Rising, strong, but not eruptive. Like breath held and released. After, people circled her with careful energy. No one asked for autographs. Some brought objects. A watch. A ring box. A set of keys. Maya took each one and nodded. These would be part of the next cycle. The next room. That night, back at her apartment, she removed her shoes, unpinned her hair, and stood before her wall of sketches. At the center hung a single word in thick black ink. Continuum. Not closure. Not conclusion. Just movement forward. She lit a candle, opened her notebook. Beneath the last page, she wrote, "This is not the end. This is the stage without curtains." And then, for the first time in years, she slept with the window open, unafraid. Some stories don't end with revenge. They end with return, not to the past, but to the self that was buried beneath compromise, applause, and love given too quietly. Maya didn't rewrite her past. She didn't need to. She reframed it, like a curator handling a fragile artifact. Her scars became coordinates, her silence a medium, and her name, once erased in the credits, now open doors she built with her own hands. She learned that healing isn't loud. It's not a scream, not a headline. It's the slow, daily art of refusing to disappear again. The applause she gets now, it isn't for who she stood behind. It's for the woman who walked away and never looked back. And that's the story, not of the woman he lost, but of the woman she finally chose to become.